Hi everyone, welcome. I'm glad to be here to talk to you about international and multilingual SEO. I'm Vasco. I'm the SEO manager of All in Global. We are a language service provider, and I'm really eager to share some knowledge about this so interesting and so challenging topic that is SEO when it's done on an international scale, when it's done on a multilingual scale. The challenges are not that different from conventional SEO when you're talking about single market SEO, but still there are things that you need to consider and you need to make sure that you implement on your side, that you have on your strategy to make sure that you are successful when going global with your marketing strategy and of course with your SEO strategy. I'll try to make this as simple, clean and easy to understand as possible. I'll try not to bore you to death by the end of this presentation. And on a more serious note, I really hope that you enjoy it. I really hope that you take some learnings from here and that you can actually implement some of the things that I will be approaching. Even though I will obviously not be able to go in depth in all the topics, and obviously I won't be able to cover them all in an extensive way, but at least I will try to pinpoint each one of them so you can have an idea of how things are and what you need to be prepared to when you are embracing an international market and a global market, which in nowadays, either you're an affiliate or even if you are an operator, you will need to be prepared for this. And I believe that for affiliates even more, because we're talking about markets that change all the time, so we need to be prepared. So if you need to change, if you need to add another market or if legislation changes, you will need to be ready, and to be ready means be able to implement a multilingual and an international SEO strategy. So let's start with this. The first thing I would like to approach here. I'm a geek for quotes, especially when it's about when they are from people that I really admire from the market. And Randy Fishkin is obviously one of those guys. He now works for SparkToro. We used to work for Moz, or I don't know if it still works on both now. And why did I chose this quote? Because this is really good to kick off this conversation. Randy Fishkin says, you have to ask yourself, whenever you are producing any type of content, who will amplify this and why? And this is crucial to understand. And this is really a starting point to anything you do in terms of SEO. You already have in place, for sure, a digital marketing strategy, and you are implementing an SEO strategy. But what you really need to know is to who you are talking to, who is your audience, who will be reading the stuff that you read, the content that you publish, and who will be able to amplify it, and who will be interested. And more than that, why? Why are they interested in your content? And this is when it gets interesting, because this applies not only for conventional single market SEO, but it does apply to international and multilingual SEO. And this is when you need to really be ready for this challenge. Because if you're talking about a multiple market, then the challenges multiply, and you really be needing to know how your audience behaves, who she is or who they are, and what will they want, so they amplify the content that you produce. I will try, this is just a little small table of contents. I will go through an overview of what is international SEO. Probably some of you already know, but it's always interesting just to have a broad idea, okay, what it is, what are we talking about when we're talking about international and multilingual SEO. Then we will go in a little bit more in depth in terms of technical SEO. So we will go to the technical side of SEO. What do we need to implement? What do we need to pay attention to in order to be prepared and to have our website ready to tackle multiple markets? On the third point in this case, I will be approaching content SEO. This is also very, very, very important. I cannot stress enough how important it is that we have a very good strategy in terms of content, so our SEO works on a multiple market and a multiple language landscape. This is extremely important, and this is something that needs to be part of our strategies in terms of SEO. And ultimately, the last point, last but not least, offsite SEO. This although it is not as approached by a lot of people, this is also very, very, very important in terms of international SEO. And you really need to focus on the markets that you're targeting, and on the languages that you're targeting to implement a successful strategy in terms of offsite SEO. So all these elements, these are the three pillars that you actually have on SEO in terms of international. So first point we're going to talk about is, it's an overview. What it is and why do we actually need international SEO? Or does it apply in my case or it doesn't? So let's start with that. Once again, I'm quoting people, and in this case I'm quoting Moz. Moz gives you a definition of what international SEO is. It's the process of optimizing your website so that search engines can easily identify which countries you want to target and which languages you use for your business. This is the core of all this subject, is markets and languages. Those will be the two core fundamentals of what we will be talking here. First one, markets. You might be talking about multiple countries. You might be talking about multiple regions, and at the same time, languages. You have both options. You might have one market with multiple languages, or you might have multiple markets with one language, or you might have both, multiple markets and multiple languages. All of this is at international SEO, and obviously international and multilingual SEO. And these are the aspects that we really need to be focused on this presentation, and I will try to convey the message to you guys. So, first question you need to ask yourself, do you have a global audience? I think nowadays, if you're an affiliate, it doesn't matter regardless of what industry you're talking about, you probably have a global audience, or at least you want to be ready to face a global audience. And what is this of global audience? Again, multiple markets and multiple languages. If you tackle more than one country, or if you tackle more than one language, you need to be prepared in terms of international SEO. Why? Because SEO, it doesn't really work as one fits all. You need to adapt in each market that you are facing, and each market has its own challenges. And even more, each language has its own challenges, mainly when we're talking about content SEO. So, if you really are answering yes to the question, do you have a global audience? Then yes, you do need an international multilingual SEO strategy in your company, in your website, and if you're an affiliate, even more, because you need to be prepared in case you want to add or remove or be adaptable to the market in terms of what you're offering to your clients and to your audience. So the main three pillars in terms of international SEO are the ones that I've mentioned before: technical SEO, content SEO, and offsite SEO. Those three are obviously the same pillars as you have for single market SEO. But in this case, we will have to be specific in how we approach the SEO when we're talking about international and when we're talking about multilingual. On the technical side of it, we will be talking about website structure, we will be talking about tagging and signaling optimization, meaning that you need to send the proper message to search engines so they know what audience you're talking to and which content they should present to your audience when they're looking for it. So you don't get a Spanish guy getting a French content and a French guy getting a Portuguese content. So this is where the technical side of it will be crucial for the spiders, search engine spiders, to actually crawl and fetch the proper content that you need to deliver to your audience. The second is content. And again, I know this is a cliche, but it's true. Content is king, and you really need to be prepared in terms of content, and you cannot apply just one fits all. You need to be prepared to go local. And this might sound like a nonsense, but it does not. If you want to go on a global scale, you really need to start to think on a smaller scale. But we'll go through that in a moment. And again, on content, what we're talking about languages, we're talking about topics, and we're talking about keyword optimization. All those three vectors are crucial for international SEO in terms of content. And then last but not least, offsite SEO. So in terms of offsite SEO, again, this is not approached a lot of times for a lot of people, but it is really, really important that you really target markets, you really target languages, and you choose the proper domains to have your offsite strategy. And all those elements together will build a solid and a very strong international SEO strategy. So this is a really, if there's one message that I really want you guys to take after this presentation, this is one of them. To go global, you need to target local. What is this? If you have a global audience, you will need to speak to local languages. So it means that you have multiple markets, or you have a big landscape in which you're talking to several markets, and each one of those markets, and even in a singular market, you might have one market speaking more than one language. So you will really need to be sure that you are delivering the proper content, you are informing the search engines of the proper content to display, and you actually keep your audience engaged, or else they will drop and go to someone else who is actually delivering the content in the language they want. And there are several examples that we'll go through in the next slides of the presentation, which we will go through how important this is. But again, if you're targeting on a global market, if you have multiple countries or multiple languages, you really, it's a global one, it's a global market, you're an affiliate, you want to target as much as you can, but you really need to focus on each market individually. So you don't try to fit one strategy for everyone, because it won't work. This is when your SEO will implode, when your content strategy will implode, because it doesn't work like that. Each market has its own singularities. So you will need to go for each market and do a proper work, technical work, content work, and offsite work. So let's start with the technical, because this is usually when people are a little bit more stressed, when they are not too familiar with the technical side of things. But again, it doesn't have to be a really big monster that you have to tackle. If you go through each step and you simply implement each way of each segment on the way you go along, then things don't have to be complicated. As long as you follow it, and again, there are a lot of CMSs who have a lot of plugins that can help you with this, and can guide you through this. You have a lot of information and a lot of content online that you can use to go through this, or you can go to agencies that you have a lot of very good agencies. You can come to us, All in Global, we can do this as well, but you have a lot of agencies that can help you do this. And don't try to just, okay, I'll do this later, because the technical side of SEO, it's really crucial that you implement from day one. When you choose the CMS, when you choose a domain, from scratch, you will need to think of it when you're implementing your strategy. So the sooner you can get the SEO strategy on, the best, because this is when it will have more impact, this is when it will be better for you to do it, and this will have a really good results in the end, and the maintenance is way simpler when you start from the beginning. So the first thing we need to talk about in terms of technical SEO, it's the URL structures. So how does this work? Because this is crucial, because this is the first element that you will be signaling to search engines in terms of for which audience you are talking about and in what language do you want them to read the content. So this is the first thing that a Spider, a Google bot, or a Bing bot, that it will go to your website and fetch the information. This is the first element that they will actually look at. So we have, I'm going to give you 4. We have more, probably more options that you can actually use in terms of selecting the URL structure that you want, but these 4 are probably the ones that you're going to go to, which 99% of people go to, and these are the ones that we can actually say they have results and they are good practices in terms of SEO. The first is CCTLD, and this means country code top level domain. This is probably the best, and if we have to choose one in terms of signaling search engines, what's the best signal you can send to search engines that you're targeting, in this case that you have on a slide? For instance, France, obviously if you have your domain .fr, you are sending the strongest signal that you can send to search engines in terms of which markets that you're actually targeting. But there's one thing with the CCTLD option, which is to have a country code independent domains, which is they can get very difficult to manage and very expensive to manage. Plus, they are not very flexible. So they are really the best in terms of signaling search engines, but at the same time, they can be like a pain to manage because they are complex. You will have several domains. You will have one for France.fr, one for Spain.es, one for Portugal.pt, one for UK.co.uk. But then again, you will have multiple websites, and you will have to have you will have to have like a very strong team that can manage all these different domains that you will be managing, and at the same time the costs will obviously multiply. And at the same time, as an affiliate, if you decide to change your market, or if you decide to tackle different markets, or you're going to quit this one, legislation changed, and you want to drop the French market, you want to go to the Spanish market, if you are on a CCTLD, you already have a .fr, and you won't be able to drop it, so you already chose it. So in terms of flexibility, it's also probably not the solution that it's the best in this sense. If you are really sure of the markets that you want to change, of course, in terms of signaling, this is probably the best option. And then you have another option, which is subdomain. Again, it's not as flexible and not as easy to move around if you want to change markets as it is, for instance, subdirectory. Subdomain is basically an international content placed on a third level domain. You have your domain, which is .com, and then you have a third level of domain in which you will add your country code, in which you will have the market that you're targeting. Again, it's a little bit easier to manage. You don't have several versions of your website, but you will still be less flexible, and again, it's still more complex than other solutions that you can actually implement on your side. There's a third way that you can do this, which is a subdirectory. Subdirectory is when you place the content, international content, on specific directories. This is the one that you see. This is like a mainstream one. Most people use this one because it's actually more flexible. Again, it doesn't give the best signal to search engines. That's probably the CCTLD option, but gives you flexibility to upload and drop and move around the languages and the markets along the way when you're adding more stuff to your affiliate, when you're dropping some markets because you cannot do affiliation there anymore. So it gives you more flexibility to work when you want to have that space to change from this market to that market and implement this one and drop this one. So this is probably, if I had to choose one, this is probably the one that between what you lose in terms of signaling search engines and what you're getting from a perspective of the flexibility, then this is probably the best option that you have. And subdirectories are really flexible, and if you have CMSs like WordPress or Drupal, you have a lot of plugins that can actually help you do this, and you have companies that can actually help you implement it with a lot of APIs, and there's a lot of AI solutions out there in the market. We have some in the company that can actually help you integrate the translation part of the websites and the implementation of several languages on a website. So this is actually the one that I would actually say, if you have to choose one between what you lose and what you're getting, probably one of the best options. But again, each case is a case, and you really need to make sure that you have a strategy behind you and that you will choose according to your strategy. There's a final one that I would like to talk to you, which is the GTLD lang. This is a language parameter. This is not, it's a little bit different than the CCTLD, the subdomain, and the subdirectory, but still, a lot of websites, what they do, instead of targeting markets, they target languages. So they have a landscape of a market for everyone. Okay, the website is for all the markets, and then you will change according to the several languages that you have on the website. This is also an option, but if you have a multi-markets, can get a little bit tricky if you don't do it properly. But again, all those four options are available. All those four options are good SEO practices. You need to choose the one that fits your needs. Each one of them have pros and cons. Each one of them has ways that they signal better the search engines. They are more flexible, less flexible. But all those options, if you choose them, it means that you are getting your website from the start ready to receive and to take several markets and several languages. And this is really a fundamental technical SEO approach that you need to have to be successful. And how do the search engines work when you have a query from any one of these markets. You get a query, and here you can give an example of France, China, Brazil. They will give you an input. They will be searching for something, and what is happening? It's on your website. You will translate if the information that you're getting from the user, from his IP, from the languages that he's choosing, from the market where he is, and it will deliver the best option on the website for that user. This is why you need to implement the technical side of SEO quite carefully, so you don't risk sending to the Chinese market the French page, or the Brazilian market the Chinese page. You really need to make sure that the render and the fetching is really happening on the languages and on the markets that you want your website to deliver. So this is why it's so important that you have a good technical SEO implemented on your website, to make sure that you're not delivering the wrong content to the wrong people. And this is all about the same thing, how your website is signaling search engines in terms of what content do you have, which markets are you targeting, and which language are you targeting. And all of this can be done in a first stage on a technical level. And this is what you really need to pay attention to. The implementations are not that complicated. As long as you are supported by someone who knows how to do stuff and who knows how to implement these technical features, you should be able to have your website technically ready for the international landscape and for getting queries from different countries and in different languages. There's something else I really want to talk to you about, which is the country and language tagging. This can happen at the same time that you are implementing everything else. So far, we're talking about how you're going to structure your domain, if you're going to, are you going to inform search engines about the markets that you're targeting, if it's .fr, if it's .ca. But remember, you might have a domain that you choose that you're targeting Canada, and your domain will be .ca. But there's something else. In Canada, you might be speaking English, or you might be speaking French, Canadian French or English French, or Canadian English. And this is something that you really need to pay attention to, because on the same market you might have multiple languages. And you have several examples. India, Switzerland, you have like Italian, French, German. So the domain will be that. The market is identified to search engines, but now you need to tell them which language you want to display when the user is going to look for a website and is going to open your website. And this is when the language coding and the language tagging is really crucial. The first tagging that I really want to talk to you about, is the crucial one, is the href-lang. This is the parameter that you're going to add to your language that will allow search engines to identify that content as to be for that market and in that language. You have an example there, which is href-lang equals EN US, meaning that you're targeting the US, but the English-speaking the audience. Which means if there's a Spanish people looking in the US, which they might have on their IPs and on their parameters, the Spanish language, you should have available the ESUS, meaning the Spanish for the US. And this is where the href-lang comes into play, and these parameters is when you need to implement them, so you tell search engines that it's on that market and on that language. You have another alternative. If you have a website in which you initially want to target just 2 or 3 languages, but there's a 4th or 5th language that it's already coming to your website, but you still don't have it, you implement something that it's called xdefault. Xdefault is the tag that you add, it's a parameter that you add to your URL that is telling you that for all the markets and for all the languages that you don't have a specific configuration on your website to display, you will display a default. You choose a standard English that you present to everyone else that you don't have a specific language or parameter set up on your website. Means that you have Spanish and French, and someone from Portugal is going to search for that. You will have that X default, which is the one that is going to show up for everyone else that is not in Spain or in France. That's the X default. And then you have 2 other things that are not as relevant probably in terms of international SEO, but they're really crucial to have because they're an extra that you can add to have your international SEO in place and successfully. And that's schema markup in one hand, and this is what will identify your website for search engines, what it is about, what are you talking about, and what content are you delivering to your audience, what are you. And this is something that you can, it's not easy to do. It's something that if you can have someone on your team who's really keen on SEO, or if you want an agency that is working for you, this is something that you should seek for help if you don't know how to do it. But, or at the same time, if you have CMSs that they exist, again, WordPress, Drupal, that you can use to implement a schema markup, you should. Schema markups are a fundamental way to tell search engines what your website is about, who your audience is, and how do you structure your website. And then on a final note, I want to talk about geo-targeting. Geo-target is, once you have all this set up, the work is not done yet. You should go to the Webmasters tool on Google, on Bing, on Baidu, on Yandex. You go to the Webmasters tools on each one of those search engines, obviously the ones that you are interested in and you have marketing for, and you go there and you have a place in each one of those Webmasters tools to go and select the markets that you are targeting. And by doing that, you are reinforcing the information that you're giving to search engines, that your page is actually relevant to those markets and in those languages. And this is done on the Webmasters tool. This is done, and again, Bing, Google, Yandex, Baidu. In each one of them, you have different ways, but all of them have on the Webmasters tool a place where you can go to international SEO. It specifically says international SEO or international audience, and you go there and you do the setup, and you should implement it on each one of them. If you have a market in Russia and the UK, let's say, you go for Google, you go for Yandex, and implement it on each one of them. So now we go to content SEO. So why is this? What do you need to do in terms of content SEO and in terms of on an international landscape, on a multilingual landscape? First question that we get, and we get a lot of this with a lot of our clients, is where do I optimize my multilingual content? And it's really super simple. The first thing is the front end. It's where you upload your content. It's where your content is. This is where you need to do, the first thing you need to do is to, on your front end of your website, the content that you upload, the content that you deliver to your audience, you will need to optimize it for your audiences. So if you have a multiple market audience, if you have a multiple language audience, you will need to create content for each one of those markets and each one of those language in a different way, because each one of them, it's a different market, and each one of them works in a different way. The second one is metadata, which is basically the information that you're giving content-wise for the search engines. And again, I've seen this mistake happen a lot, and I cannot name how many times that I've seen it. Even on websites that have more than one language on their websites, then the metadata, it's all in English. So you have Spanish, French, Portuguese, English, but then you have the English version with the metadata in English, the French version with the metadata in English, the Spanish version with the metadata in English. This is not something you need to do. You need to actually implement the several language at the metadata level as well. So the meta title, the meta description, and all the information that you need to do at a meta level needs to be on the language that your content is as well, or else the search engines and the spiders will not read it properly. There will be a competition that will do it properly and go ahead of you. And there's another something else that you can do, which is the tagging. Either for the media and all sorts of tagging, you need to make sure that all the tagging that you do is done on the language and thinking about the markets that you are actually targeting. Don't use one fit all. It never works in international SEO. So, multilingual content optimization. What do you need to focus on, and what do you need to do in terms of multilingual SEO? The first thing that you need to think about is the content language. So if you're targeting either one market with several languages or several markets with multiple languages as well, you will need to address each one of that audience in that specific language. I can give you a couple of examples. I can give you, for instance, the example that I gave you before of Switzerland. If you're going to target Switzerland as a market, you will probably need to see which regions of Switzerland you're actually targeting. Because if you're doing for all Switzerland, you will have to have content in Italian, in German, in French, and all the languages that are spoken locally. So you can address each one of those mini markets or regions or local in a proper way. So you can deliver the content in the language that the audience speaks, not just give them one for everyone, which usually, once again, never works. So write on the local language and use the singularities of each of the languages, because you can have your website in Spanish and yet your Spanish is ready for Spain, but it's not ready for Mexico, because the type of Spanish and the singularity of each one of the regions is different. So the Spanish is not really the same. So the flair of the language is not the same in both of them. So you really need to pay attention on how you deliver the message to your audience. So if you're going to speak in Spanish, it's great, you can target both of them, but you need to make sure that the Spanish that you're speaking to Spain is not the same that you're speaking to Mexico, because both of them are different and have little perks on them that really makes it different between one side and the other. So if you're targeting both markets, be careful with how you deliver your content. Keyword research. This is crucial. This is really, really crucial. And I can give you multiple examples on how this can go wrong. You really need to make your keyword research and optimize your content at a local level. You need to search on the local language. You cannot think that, okay, I'm going to do a research for this market, and this market actually, they look for casinos, they look for sports betting, and they look for, I don't know, let's say esports. And they have a couple of terms that are really, really popular in that market. So I'm going to take that, I'm just going to translate those popular terms that I'm using to optimize my content in that language, and I'm going to just replicate them in all the other languages. I'll translate them, but just translate them, purely translate, and that's it, and the content is done. No, this is very, very, very wrong. The same terms, and I can give you the example again of, for instance, the English, which is a very, very common one. UK English and US English. Both terms are actually the same, but the terminologies that people search for and the terms that people look for are actually different. So if you have a keyword research done on a US level, don't expect to just replicate it on the UK level, because people search for different things and they use different terms to search for things. So you really need to focus your international SEO at the local level and look for what local people actually look for, because that's what gives your content the edge and the optimization that you actually need when you're going to an international market. And then again, same thing, topic research. It's exactly the same thing. The popular topics in the UK and the US, and both speak the same language, are different. Of course, you can go look for the pandemic or COVID, and obviously they will be popular in all the world, but that's one topic. If you're looking for specific topics on the UK or the US, or if you go to India, who does speak English as well, the topics are different. The games they play are different. The sports they like are different. So you need to focus your topic research on a market level. And that's crucial to be successful in terms of optimizing your content. Again, search engines. If you're targeting multiple countries, and I'm going to give you here 3 examples, Google, Yandex, and Baidu. If you're looking for optimize your content and to be successful in Russia, you are not supposed to optimize your Google alone. Or if you're doing it in China, you're not going to optimize your Google, you're going to optimize your Baidu. And if you are in Russia, you're going to optimize thinking about the search engine Yandex. Not all markets use Google, so don't focus on Google alone to maximize your website, to optimize your website. You really need to think about which markets are you targeting and what's the search engine that actually that market uses the most. 90% of the people will use Google, it's true, and most of the markets will use Google, but not all of them. And I'm giving you 2 very good examples in huge markets, China and Russia. They don't use Google in a majority. They use Yandex and they use Baidu. They do use Google in some levels, but those 2 at least, even if you do it on Google side, you should also be doing it if you are in those markets on Yandex or on Baidu. So make sure you optimize and you do your research and you do all the content level research based on the search engine that market actually looks for. So now let's talk about the final pillar that I'm talking about in terms of international SEO and multilingual SEO, which is the offsite. And sometimes this just goes under the radar. People just think, okay, what's there in terms of international SEO or multilingual SEO that you need to pay attention in terms of offsite? But you actually do. And you actually do it. It's very crucial to do it. So how do you optimize my offsite SEO for multiple markets? Content outreach and business listings. Those are the two main features that you need to pay attention to when you're doing the offsite. And when you're doing a content outreach, you really need to pay attention to small details that are not small at all, they are really crucial. And when you're defining and implementing a targeted, localized, and market-oriented link building or digital PR strategy, which is the offsite SEO, it's mainly link building and digital PR strategy. You need to think about the markets that you're targeting and the languages that you're targeting. And this is something that you really need to pay attention to. You cannot just simply go to a global website and do your digital PR and do your link building strategy and apply it to all the markets that you have. It doesn't work like that. You need to think local. Again, you're going global, but you need to think local to be successful in those specific markets. And then you have the business listings. You do it on Google My Place, you do Google My Businesses, Bing Places, Yandex Businesses. It depends on the search engine that you're working with. You should list your business there. This gives you an edge because it will inform search engines about your business. It will even give you an extra boost when you have the little window on the search engine telling all the story and all the features of your organization. And this is actually a boost that you can give in terms of marketing for your SEO. So business listings is something you should really be paying attention to. And how do you do the content outreach in multiple markets? What should you be paying attention to? Again, it's simple. You need to be paying attention to three core fundamentals. Local domains. If you're targeting Thailand, if you're targeting China or Japan, you should on each one of them use Japanese domains, Thai domains, and Chinese domains. Don't outreach your content in places that make no sense to the market that you're targeting. And you need to make sure the more concrete domain is, the more they are using a ccTLD that we spoke before, a subdirectory that we spoke before. They should have that market on their website, and they should have, which is a second pillar, a language on that website. You need to make sure that that website speaks the same language as a target audience, and you need to produce content to outreach that on that same language, so you are actually targeting the right audience on the right market. So to do outreach, to do a link building strategy, you need to find partners in those markets and in create content in that specific language. That is the only way your outreach strategy will be successful. And again, the same as content production, you need to use local topics. Don't just go global. Don't just speak about everything and everyone or something. Evergreen content works. You should always have evergreen content on your website. But when you're targeting an outreach, when you're trying to implement, when you're trying to make people talk about you and to have the referrals on your website, just use local topics. This is the best way because this is what local people are looking for, and this is what, well, they are we. When we look for something, we want to find something relevant to my region, to my search, and to what I want to look for. I don't want to look for something and find something in Chinese because I don't speak Chinese. And I don't want to be looking for something that I really want to implement in Portugal, but the content that I have is actually related to the UK, so it doesn't really make sense. Because that topic is not relevant to me. It's relevant to the UK, but it's not relevant to Portugal. It's not relevant to the US. It's not relevant to Spain. Again, this is when you need to make sure that everything you create, you think with the local hat. And you think how local people think and how your audience thinks, so you can provide the best content and you can provide the best outreach strategy. I'm going to give you, just to finalize, because I think I already spoke too much, some freemium tools that you can use for international SEO and multilingual SEO. There are several of them. I can give you a million examples. Ubersuggest, it's a very good one, and it has not to extend, not too big, but it has a free part of the tools that they have. Ahrefs, the same thing. SEMrush, which is a powerhouse in terms of international SEO, and especially on outreach. All of these tools, they have free versions that you can use, free versions that you can try, test, and use the search engines tools. I mean, use Google Analytics, use Bing, use Yandex Analytics, Baidu Analytics, use the keyword planner in each one of those search engines. Use the tools of the search engines. They're usually free, so you don't. And if you have AdWords and campaigns running, even more. So use the tools that you have in your disposal to actually search in the local markets. And again, use people that know what they're doing. Use agencies that are good. Use agencies that are doing this for all the time. And ask for help. I mean, there's people that only does this. I mean, in my case, I'm dealing with all this stuff for international multilingual SEO for in a daily basis. So usually, no problem is something new already happened to someone. So we just need to seek for the proper help and in the proper place. And that's it. Thank you for being here with me. I hope you liked it. I tried to cut it short so it wasn't too long. If you want anything, if you need me to send you the presentation, or if you want to share some thoughts with me or ask some questions, visit our website, allin.global, or send me an email to seo@allin.global. I'll share the presentation with you. I can send it over. I can talk to you. I can help you with some stuff, or if you want me to help with anything else, just talk to me and I'll be more than glad to help. And either with the SEO, or if you want content, if you want translations, we can help you with that. We have a super cool AI translation machine that it's super amazing, and we're here to help. And I really hope you liked it, and looking forward to more presentations for you guys. Bye.